Welcome to our show, Holding Ground. My name is Laura Richer. I'm a psychotherapist and the owner of Anchor Light Therapy Collective in Seattle, Washington. Each week, I'm joined by another therapist from the Anchor Light team to tackle important topics in mental health and psychotherapy. Our goal is to promote well-being by normalizing mental health challenges. We are here holding ground for you every Tuesday morning at 9:30 a.m. on KKNW. Good morning. Welcome to Holding Ground. My name is Laura Richer, and I am a licensed psychotherapist. I'm also the owner of Anchor Light Therapy Collective in Seattle, Washington. And today I am here with my co-host, Michelle Mooney. And today me and Michelle have a great topic that you might be interested in: how to start over in a relationship. At an Anchor Light Therapy Collective, we do a lot of couples therapy, and a lot of times couples come to us when they're ready to start over. So Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course, it's always a pleasure. And good morning to all of our listeners. And thanks as always for tuning in. So yes, Laura, we are talking today about starting over in relationships. And real quick, I want to remind everyone that if you would like to start therapy and come see us, we have complimentary consultations. There's a nice button right on our homepage at anchorlighttherapy.com. And please follow us on social media if you like fun and helpful mental health content. So so starting over in relationships, absolutely, Laura, that is basically why all couples come to us, the overarching issue. So we're going to talk about when a fresh start makes sense, the ways to do it, and when it might not make sense.
And just to let everybody know that some of the examples that we're throwing out could go either way. There could be some times when starting over makes sense for one couple, but it doesn't make sense for another. So it's always up to you. And that's often why people come to therapy, to sort that out. So Michelle, what are some scenarios where it might make sense for some couples to give things another shot?
Yeah. Well, I think you raise a good point is, so it's up to the couple, if they want to renew the relationship and reconnect. But the key is both people have to commit to it, right? Not just one person wants to reconcile and start over, but both people have to. So that's so important. So if folks are ready to do that, a few scenarios where it might make sense to a couple is if there was ever an infidelity or an affair. So this can be hard for some folks to move past, and that makes perfect sense. Other couples are able to heal this and get past this, and that also makes sense for them as well. So that is the first one. The next one is one or both parties have gone through an addiction or some sort of substance use or other kinds of addictions, substances or process addictions, whatever it might be. And now they're in recovery. So that person has done what they needed to do, received treatment. They're in a good balanced place where they can focus on other people and their relationship again. And that's a great time, right? Because now that person is the person you signed up for again, right? They don't have all the complicated stuff in their way that they're struggling with.
Absolutely. Yes. And as we said, these scenarios might not make sense unless both people are invested, but we have worked with couples who are looking to work through affairs or infidelities, are in a healthier place in their lives, and they want to renew their relationships, whether that's from overcoming some sort of addiction or any other maybe problematic behavior. What else what are some other times you still see that people need to kind of come back together and agree to start over?
Well, one that a lot of couples unfortunately can struggle with is infertility. And that can leave some pretty huge ruptures in the relationship. Anytime there's some sort of loss of a dream, or gosh forbid, right, you do conceive and then you lose the child, any sort of huge grief event, right? Something that, if you're ready to have a family and you get such disheartening news in that way, it affects you, of course, on an individual level and as a couple, and that one can be pretty hard to recover from. Have you seen couples go through that at all, Laura?
Yeah, and what you talked about is a big piece of it, is they were very invested in a dream that they had for their family, and there's a grieving process that's associated with infertility. If whether that is not being able to have a child or a sibling for a child, or, an adoption that failed maybe, or just somewhere where the idea of what the family was going to be maybe is no longer a possibility, or even they've intentionally decided to go a different direction with how they're going to plan their families, but there's a grieving process that happens, and through that the couple can experience a lot of pain together. And so starting new and being open to how their family might look in the future is sometimes for couples really important time to come back together and really intentionally look at what it means for them to start over.
Right, exactly. Okay, so this next one, Laura, I think I would agree or argue, I guess I should say, that this is one of the big ones that I see in my sessions with couples, and you probably do as well. Feeling like that spark or emotional connection is gone. And that's, we get so consumed with our day-to-day lives, right? The children, our career, money, grief, all of these things that, impact us as individuals, impact our relationship, and we can kind of just become distant from one another. And that's a really difficult one. It's a definitely healable, but that's a very big reason why people feel disconnected and why they need to start over.
Absolutely. And I think that I agree with you. That's the primary reason we see couples where there's either a lot of conflict or they just don't feel connected to each other. And sometimes they're very clear as to why. Maybe they've had busy careers, they've been raising families, maybe something traumatic has happened in the relationship, and that's really caused them to pull away from each other. And so when they come in at this point, they're really looking for, maybe it's not one specific repair that needs to happen, but that they're looking to find a way to feel connected to each other once again. So I would agree that is a lot of what we're doing when we're doing couples therapy.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll touch on too how to reconnect and how to get there a little bit later in the show. And one of the other things we have on the list that is related to this is that individuals in the relationship, they don't know how to support one another anymore, or they don't feel supported. And this is a huge one where essentially these things can lead to feelings of loneliness, or being ignored, or even broken trust that my partner is going to be there for me if I am struggling with something and I go to them and they're unsupportive, they're unable to, they're absent, right? They don't even ask us questions or engage in what is going on for us. I mean, that's a heartbreak. And then again, trust, like I said, this isn't infidelity kind of trust. This is, can I trust my partner to show up for me and love me and care for me in the way that I deserve? So this is also a big one.
Absolutely. So Michelle, if a couple comes in and they both are fully invested in the idea that the relationship has value to them, they're wanting to start over, but they just don't know how are they able to get started?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that is just that can be kind of a generalized idea. We need to start over, but we have no idea what that means. We don't know where to start. It feels like a monumental and overwhelming task. And that's why they seek out people like us, right? Okay, they're going to know, they'll be able to be in the room with us. They can guide us. They can give us exercises and education, essentially, right, on how to do this. So there's a lot of things that you as a couple will need in order to get to a successful place of starting over. So some of those things, and it can be a longer list, but it's really important. Again, commitment. If you're both not committed to the process, it's not going to work. So we can see this sometimes, right? One person comes in and they're all gung-ho about healing the relationship, and the other person just kind of came along, and you can tell maybe they're not as invested. That doesn't mean that can't change, but if that stays the same and both of you aren't committed to the process and one another in the relationship, it's the possibility of starting over is really limited.
Yes.
But also things like emotional attunement, and we'll talk about that again, right? Being able to turn towards your partner and be able to accept their needs and hold space for them. But things like vulnerability, willingness to try new things, right? It's openness to new experiences, open mind in general, continued maintenance. So you get to this place where you're ready to start over, and great, you're doing the things up front. Couples counseling is really going great, or however, you decide to heal the relationship, if that's books, etc. But then you don't do it after a few months, right? You got to keep going the same way we need to take our car to the shop every year and get an oil change, right? It's not just going to run perfectly continually, right?
Absolutely. And that's often how that disconnect happens, is that the couples, and nothing malicious is happening or even traumatic necessarily, but they have just taken their attention off of their relationship, and then they find themselves in this place of disconnect. So there has to be some focus and some commitment and some consistency to start over.
Right. Exactly. So, and also things like we need to be able to adapt. We have to, of course, bring in compassion, benefit of the doubt, understanding, again, trust, right? Something that can prevent couples overall from rekindling or coming to couples therapy is, gosh, I'm going to put in all this work, but I can't trust my partner that they're really going to show up or continue the work. So again, that trust, curiosity about one another, clear boundaries as well. So, Laura, what are some of the things we should leave out of how to start over?
Yes, and this is sometimes easier said than done, but very important. We want to leave blame out of the equation for sure, even if it feels like there is a clear reason. Maybe in the case of an infidelity, or maybe if one partner had an addiction, it might be easy to say, oh, this person needs to shoulder all the blame because they caused the problem in the relationship, when in fact that is not going to be helpful in starting over. And it's also not true. It always takes two people to create a relationship dynamic. And if the relationship was unhealthy and you're ready to start over, you both need to look at that part in the relationship. So I think sometimes with blame comes shame. Shame is never good in anything. So we want to leave that out. Old narratives. So if you want to start over, you can't keep telling the same story about the past. It really boxes you in. It makes it really hard to do anything different. And it can be hard too. It can be very scary, very vulnerable, which, like you said, this vulnerability is required to start over. And at the same time, it can be very scary to open yourself up to being disappointed again. So we want to acknowledge that and be able to try to work through it, so that you can support each other and have an open mind. You have to believe that a new start is possible. If it doesn't feel like it's even possible, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's been too much hurt, too much trust has been lost, and it just isn't possible to start over. And sometimes couples who come for a fresh start come to that conclusion, and that's okay too. In therapy, we're always just trying to get you to what is true for you.
Yep, that's a perfect way of putting it, because we do see that couples go through the process and they're like, okay, you know what, this was good. I love my partner, but maybe just not in a committed relationship anymore. So this can, whatever this looks like for you, exactly. So Laura, what would you say are some good tips for making the renewal of the relationship work? What do couples need to start doing?
So I think a few things that you could, action steps that you could do, is really have a conversation about what it means to start over from each other's perspectives. And is that a vision that each of you have aligned? So if one person has a vision that's, maybe consistent with what the other person wants to leave behind, then it's a good time to have this conversation. Are we even on the same page about what it means to move forward and what that would look like? And then if you are on the same page, tapping into some resources that might be helpful to you. Of course, we always are proponents of going to couples therapy, but you could also work with a relationship expert, a dating coach. You could do a weekend retreat. The Gottman Institute hosts a lot of different weekend retreats that are designed for couples to reconnect and spark that connection once again. You can also do your own research. You can read books, articles. You can listen to podcasts like this one, Holding Ground, that you can listen to on KW.
Right.
So take some action steps.
Yeah. And the key to that, just like the whole entire process, is both of you are invested, right? If just one of you is reading the book, great. Now you have even more skills and understanding, but your partner doesn't. So, and it's not one of us job to fully educate one another, right? There has to be that commitment. Read the book, listen to the podcast. What did you hear in there that makes sense? What did you hear in here that, is a good goal for us? What insights did you gain about yourself and our relationship through going through this research? So, yep, sometimes couples therapy is cost prohibitive, time prohibitive, whatever it is. So, you can do some of this obviously outside of the therapist's office. So, all right. So another thing I think is really important is, of course, we're going to have to process our negative feelings in couples therapy or whatever it is, right? What do you need to understand about one another? What would it take for you to forgive one another? What things do we have to get past? There's usually a lot of overarching, like big hurts that will really break down and process it in our spaces here. And we kind of covered what some of those might be.
And I think this is really important because I think a lot of times when people want to start over, they're like, hey, you know what? We want to put the negative past behind us. We just want to move ahead. And they don't want to go into that because they're afraid that it's going to make it worse. But it actually is a really important part of the process because we can't really let go of the past or let go of the things that have hurt us if we don't feel that they're understood by the person that hurt us. So if I don't really believe that you understand my experience or the impact that experience had on me, it's really going to be difficult for me to trust you and move forward because I don't really know you're not going to do it to me again.
Right, exactly. And sometimes they, will ask the question, how would you know that your partner understands you? How would you know that you trust your partner again? Because that identifies or the needs that are going unmet. And so being understood is a huge one. He doesn't understand me anymore. She doesn't understand me anymore. So if we can't get to that point, and we help with how to guide you guys in learning how to understand one another again.
And it's really tricky because sometimes we have partners, a lot of times, where they don't necessarily agree with the other person's experience. Maybe the other person was really hurt by something and they don't agree that was the intention that they had, or they might not agree that they would have experienced it in the same way. And that's okay. You don't have to agree with their experience, but you have to be able to empathize with their experience and validate their feelings. And that's what builds trust. Is you don't have to have the same experience as me, but to trust you, I need to know that you understand that was what happened to me.
Yeah, exactly. If we don't have a shared agreement around the experience or the feeling, right? If you experience grief one way, I experienced it another, neither is wrong, but, acknowledging, okay, I can understand why this is hurting you in this way. I can, how can I support you through this? Like, again, that attuning, like leaning into what your partner might need. And so that's a really great way of showing that you understand. Curiosity is another one. If I'm curious and I'm interested to ask these questions, right, I want to understand you better. All right. So how about a couple more, Laura? What else do we got?
So we touched on this earlier, but close the door on unwanted experience. So once you're in agreement that you want to leave the past behind, you really process some of the negative feelings. You feel like you really understand each other's experience. You can validate each other. Close the door. Don't keep bringing the negative story in the past with you. So oftentimes we're fearful that something can happen again. We might ruminate on it. We might focus on the past. And the thing is, if you're wanting to start over, you don't want to keep focusing your attention on the things that you don't want. So you really want to be open to whatever the vision you have is for your relationship, whatever the possibility you believe is there to be able to start over. Focus your attention on that. Don't keep circling back to the past, especially if you're not dealing with any of the same behaviors. It's just fear that's triggering that response.
Yeah, absolutely. This happened 10 years ago. Maybe it's going to happen again. And that's really related to the unhelpful narratives. So if we just assume my partner's always going to be this way, and, you have to have that open mind. You can't just assume anymore, just based on past experiences. If you're both committed to the process, being open-minded about it. All right, so we talked already about couples counseling, obviously, engaging in your own personal growth work. So that's each of you taking care of your own mental health and how you manage the day to day. And if that's your own therapy or your own books or your own, support group, whatever that looks like. The next one I think is really important, and I love this one, teaching couples, is rituals of connection and small things often. So do you want to explain that one a little bit more, Laura?
Yeah, so a lot of times couples are waiting for a great opportunity to connect. They have really busy lives and they think, well, we'll have a big date night in a couple weeks, or we'll connect when we go on vacation in the summer. And in the meantime, we're very busy. And unfortunately, while those big events are awesome and it's great to have those special memories with your partner, to really commit to your relationship, to keep the connection and the spark, you need to have some daily type of rituals that help you feel connected to your partner. And these can be minor things that take 10 or 20 minutes. This can be things like having a conversation before you go to bed at night, just debriefing about your day, or having your morning coffee together, taking an evening walk with your dog, the activities of normal life, but you're doing them intentionally as a time to really connect with your partner. No phones, no TVs, just being intentional about spending time with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And things like holding hands or kissing each other goodbye and hello. And, like you're saying, all these little small things, what they do is they're deposits into our relationship or emotional bank account. So every little good thing we add, the more and more there is, that it increases our positive perspective of one another and our relationship as well. So doing these day-to-day things is going to make you feel connected and less separated and less like strangers or roommates, because you're making that intentional contact each and every day.
Yes. Yeah. And the small things consistently over time can have a big impact. And it's interesting when I work with couples, and sometimes people come in and out of therapy just depending on their schedules or where they're at in their relationship. But over the years, I've had people come back to me after taking breaks and they'll say, you know what, we were doing really good. We were doing our connection. We were feeling really good about our relationship. And then we kind of let it fall off. And then all of a sudden we found ourselves feeling really disconnected again. So it is really in those small things that you can see a big change, and it has a big impact.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. That's great. Okay, so another one that's kind of tied to this is having a stress-reducing conversation with your partner. Now, if we could do this ideally once a day, that would be great. Like you said, before bed or checking in after work. And the stress-reducing conversation is external stress, what you both have going on outside of the relationship. So we want to focus on that. And Laura, do you want to model a little bit of what the stress-reducing conversation is? So if I come to you, Laura, and I say, oh gosh, work today, and I can't believe the line at the grocery store, and then this guy cut me off, and the cat's sick, and I'm just kind of coming to you with all my external stuff, what would be an example of you not doing the right thing in that scenario?
I mean, Michelle, I think you should just get over it. You're pretty lucky. People have it harder, and your complaining is kind of stressing me out. That's probably what you don't want to say.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Or try to offer help, which is, a natural instinct, right? Well, have you tried saying this to your boss? Or next time, you shouldn't go to Safeway at that time. It's like, no, that's not what we're looking for, right? So if we were to do it the right way, how might you respond to me?
So what we want to do is this is very hard for partners, because when your partner is distressed, you feel distressed, so you're probably going to quickly want to fix it or change it. But you just want to say, acknowledge it. It sounds like you had a really tough day. Tell me more about that. I can see why you're frustrated. Or is there you can even offer to help. Is there anything I could do to help you or support you? Offering to help and fixing are different. So offering to help, I think, is okay. But just creating space for a negative emotion. Usually when people are venting about external stresses, they don't want anyone to fix it or change it. They just want to talk about it. And fixing it or trying to change it or find a solution feels like you're shutting them down. You're not validating how they're feeling. And it escalates their stress, which then it gets turned probably towards the person trying to fix, because they didn't want to be fixed.
Yeah, exactly. And, we want to show each other, hey, I'm on your side. So if you're upset about, again, the guy at Safeway or whatever, gosh, I can't believe what a jerk, he said that to you, versus like, well, next time, just don't say anything or don't do that. Right. So again, joining one another in that, making sure you feel like you have a teammate. Cause sometimes we get home and we want to vent and that's it. Right. We're not looking for self-help at that point. So Laura, we only have a couple more seconds here. So what else do you want to make sure we cover with our listeners here today?
Yeah, I think let's be very clear about when it might not be the right move to start over. Because like we said in the beginning of the episode, it isn't always the right choice. So Michelle, what are some times when maybe it's not a good idea to keep trying to move forward in the relationship?
Mm-hmm. The first one is deal breakers. Now that's kind of a heading for a lot of different things. So whatever your deal breakers are in a relationship, if your partner is checking off enough of those, and that can be really anything. So, it's anything from I obviously don't want you to step outside of the relationship unless if we agree to, somebody who chews really loud or, leaves their shoes all over the house, is inconsiderate, but, obviously bigger things too that are deal breakers. If you're on the different page with big life choices, values is another one. So, these things can add up. So would you say anything else on that one, Laura?
Yeah. And like you said, I think this is important that everybody's deal breakers are different. For somebody, it might be that their partner doesn't hold the same religious beliefs as they do, or the same lifestyle beliefs. For somebody, maybe somebody doesn't eat healthy and that could be a deal breaker for their partner, or, there could be all kinds of things. So deal breakers are specific to you. There's no right or wrong there. It's just about what won't work for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big one.
Absolutely. And one thing I really want to mention is safety. So if the relationship is no longer safe, either if that's physically safe, if that's emotionally safe, anything that is just kind of tearing you down as a person, right? We think about domestic violence in this scenario, and that could, again, be physical or emotional. So having to keep that in mind, it can be either one. And there's a lot that goes into it. We could talk all day about that one and what emotional violence looks like. And
that's another episode. Maybe we'll talk about that next time.
All right, well, stay tuned. Yeah. Anything else, Laura?
I think so anything that's a deal breaker, you get to define what your deal breakers are. If there's just a reason that you don't really feel like you can get past what happened, sometimes when there's infidelities and affairs and relationships, some people can genuinely start fresh and have a beautiful relationship. They can heal and move forward, and some people can't. And if you're somebody who just can't move past it, then it's probably better to move on. And I think we covered it today, Michelle. So if you're looking to start over in your relationship, you and your partner are both committed to a new start, where can they find us, Michelle?
Well, they can find us at anchorlighttherapy.com. We've had added a lot of exciting and wonderfully skilled new therapists to our team, and you can find the nice big button at the top of our homepage to schedule a consultation with either one of them.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for listening to Holding Ground. We will be back next week at 9:30 a.m. here on KKNW. Have a great week.
Goodbye.
Thanks for tuning in to Holding Ground. You can hear us here every Tuesday morning at 9:30 a.m. on KKNW. I'm Laura Richer at Anchorlight Therapy Collective.
Find us online at anchorlighttherapy.com.
And we'll see you next week.